Shalom, everyone. My name is Fred Greene. I am the rabbi at Congregation Har Hashem here in Boulder, and I'm speaking to you from my house. And I hope that you have a wonderful Shavuot. This is a strange time in our lives, and I really appreciate how my fellow rabbis in Chaver have put together a whole program to help us find the light in challenging times. And this video, this teaching is going to be something more personal. A lot of folks in my synagogue know my relationship with this particular text, but in the Torah portion for Ki Tisa, we see that Moses is at a moment of crisis. He witnesses the golden calf amongst the Israelites. He comes down the mountaintop of Sinai with these tablets and he smashes them down and he goes up to God. And this is where something that's really compelling takes place. In chapter 33, in verse 12, Moses basically says to God, you have to go first. You need to lead. I've already agreed to go with you, but you need to lead. And God agrees. God says, okay, I'm going to go first. You can't see me face to face, God says, but you can only see my back, because the idea, of course, is that God's presence is so intense that nobody can survive being that close and seeing God face to face, as they say. So the text says that Moses is going to follow God's back, and God puts Moses in a cleft of the rock. Imagine this cliff being surrounded on three sides, and God will take God's own hand, place it in front of Moses' face, and walk in front, and then Moses can follow. There's so much here that resonates for me. And I think on a personal level, look, I've had my own challenges. I think about this text because when my father died, I was only 15 years old. My mother died maybe 15 years ago. And so being in the world without people who know me as son has always been a struggle for me, something that brings a level of sadness and loss into my own life. But this text helps me to see that in the midst of crisis, the way Moses was feeling a spiritual crisis, God was more than just present. That hand blocking Moses's face so that Moses wouldn't see God face to face. For me, it's more like kind of that gentle hand on your shoulder when you're having a hard time, and a real intimate moment with someone who could be your mentor, someone who can make a difference in your life the way I feel God has made a difference in my life. I think that's pretty amazing. And not only is God close and God is present and God is going to lead and lift some of the burden off of Moses, in a little bit it also says that God is going to proclaim these most significant attributes about God. And what does that mean? We know that there is a tradition of these 13 attributes of God. And it talks about God's graciousness and goodness and all of those things. But when God really introduces God's own self to Moses in this most intimate way, beholding a presence of God, it says, I will make my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name. And then it has God's name, which we don't pronounce, and we don't know how to pronounce. That God's going to pronounce the name eternal, and the grace that I grant and the compassion that I show. So around God's name, we see three things: goodness, grace, and compassion. I think in this moment of pandemic, in any moment of crisis, that's what I need. I need goodness, I need grace, and I need compassion. And I think what God is waiting for us to do is to bring that out into the world. How can you bring goodness, grace, and compassion out into the world. Folks in the Jewish community tend not to focus a whole lot on grace. We think it's not really our idea, but it is. Unconditional love, a total commitment to being present. Our loved ones, even when they disappoint us, are still going to be loved unconditionally. Isn't that what we ultimately want from God, from a higher source, from this ultimate presence in the universe? Isn't that what we want from each other? To be known, to be loved, to have goodness be around us? I think that sense of goodness isn't just about how we feel, but it's about what we bring. It is about how we encounter others. I think it's almost physical on how our behavior is going to make a difference in other people's lives. I think that's what God's waiting for too. And then the last one was compassion, because something has to move us and stir us. And if God is going to be defined by God's name relating to goodness, grace, and compassion, well, not only does that bring me comfort, not only does that share light in a dark time, it helps me to feel empowered to get back up and do the next step. Moses took the dictation again and brought the commandments down to the people right after this. And for me, I'm not bringing tablets down from Sinai, but whatever my gifts are to bring, I have to bring them. Whatever I have to do in order to bring God's presence into the world as God's partner in continuing the work of creation, that's what I have to do. And I hope that's something that could be helpful to you this Shavuot, that you get to return to Sinai, have a heart-to-heart with the Holy One of Blessing, share your truth, say what's hurting you, what you're afraid of. God's going to respond with a outstretched hand on your shoulder, helping you to feel maybe a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more calm, a little bit more gentle, and to know that ultimately God's name is goodness, grace, and compassion. And if that is what God is really all about, then how do we bring God's presence to not just our lives, but to others? So, friends, Chag Sameach. I hope that makes sense. I hope it's a little interesting, and you got to know me just a little bit better too. So, take good care, be well, stay safe, and shalom to you and to yours.